Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Wilder Ride, where we are getting wilder by the minute, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And for season 2, we are diving into Blazing Saddles, one dazzling urbanite minute at a time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders.
I am your co-host, Walt Murray.
And it's our pleasure to welcome back in one instance, but the pairing this time, so the first time we get the pairing together, the guys from the Groundhog Minute, we have Sean German and Dave Pallas. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us on.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having us. Really looking forward to talking about this great movie.
I'm so glad you guys were able to join us. I know, Sean, you were a repeat guest for us during season 1. And we had,
and thank you for having me back anyway.
And we still brought you back. We gave you a bunch of rules and quid pro quos and some provisos. And but you said you'd be okay today. You said no monologues planned.
Yeah, and I appreciate Bubba, who you sent along to sit next to me while we record with the blackjack in his hand, ready to hit the proverbial mute button on me.
Look, Mongo's long-lost second cousin was bummed he didn't get cast in the movie, and he needed a job.
There you go.
So we sent him.
We're job creators here at Wilder.
What our listeners don't know is we just cut out your 67-minute introduction, so maybe we'll do that as an extra, but we had to edit that out of this show.
We'll make it a Patreon bonus episode.
Yes, for the low price of $5 a month, we won't make you listen to Sean German.
Oh my God, people pay to hear this morning zoo? Yikes.
What a bargain.
We know it's bad when he goes, well, I've prepared a few remarks that begin something like, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Oh, God.
Allow me to whip this.
Excuse me. Awesome. Well, we do this all the time when we bring guests on, especially for the first time in a season. Sean, you've been with us before with our last our last season with Young Frankenstein, coming back now for Blazing Saddles. So I'll go to you first, and then I'll hit Dave. We always like to kind of get a level set of where does Blazing Saddles fit in with your memory of watching the movie, where it fits as far as comedies, and what do you think about the movie?
Well, I love the movie. I think it's high up there. I don't have an exact ranking of comedies, but it's probably in the top 10. I mean, it is way up there. In my book, I think it's number 2 in Mel Brooks' resume is in his canon of filmmaking. I think Blazing Saddles is second only to Young Frankenstein. I really, really enjoy this movie. I don't remember the first time I saw it. I would have been too young to see it in the theaters. And this is, I would have been too young just because I don't think it's a good idea to bring screaming babies to movie theaters, but also that this is an R-rated movie. And I was certainly below the appropriate age to see this. But my parents, particularly my father, is a big Mel Brooks fan, would have introduced me to Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein and a lot of the other movies that he made. So this would have been a regular part of my childhood. And certainly once VCRs and things like HBO and cable television and, other ways of seeing movies other than in the theater, this would have been a regular, in our lives. So I can't even count the number of times I've seen it, and I love it. I love it all. And particularly, we've got some good minutes coming up this week, so I won't go on too long. But yeah, it's a great comedy. It's part of my life. It's something, the quotes, the lines from the movie come out in regular conversation all the time. So, thumbs up. You guys picked another winner, but as we know with Gene Wilder, they're all winners.
Well, before I get to Dave, let me ask you this. Do you remember when you first realized there was a much bigger or deeper message to this movie than just the outright surface comedy? Because I think we were all introduced to this movie at a younger age, and we probably all gravitated toward the fart jokes, the punching of the horse, the giggling inappropriately at the misuse of words or the intentional uses of epithets to put people down. And then as we got older, we realized, oh, there's a message here. Do you have any kind of a thought on that as far as when you started to see this was a different kind of comedy in that whole genre of satire?
Wow. Probably. I don't think there was a single like aha moment where it suddenly dawned on me. I think a little bit at a time, and it still happens. Still rewatching it even now, I feel like I'm still picking up on new things because, it probably started in high school, learning a little bit more about American history and the Western expansion and wagon trains and stuff like that, and being able to put some of the scenes of the movie into context. But there's that going on. There's the European settlers versus Native Americans. There's white versus black. There's ranchers versus farmers. There's the city folk versus the country folk. There is a lot going on in this movie, just like we had with Young Frankenstein. There's a lot of layers when you say that the more serious side and the social aspects of what they're satirizing here and kind of the deeper message. There's so much going on. There's so many levels. Probably started in high school, but just continued again. I don't think there was a single aha moment that like, wow, you can make a serious message and you can say something with comedy. It's discovering all those different messages and all those different aspects through the repeated rewatchings over the decades.
No, I think that's a fair statement. And I think we probably would all say very something similar. You don't necessarily come to it with that Shazam, aha. You just continue to discover watching it over and over and over and just gaining more years and wisdom. Dave, what about you? What are your thoughts on the film?
Okay, Blazing Saddles. I think I do like the film, but I think it was the one that was on TV the least. So I get the least views out of it. When I was a kid, I think the ones that I liked the most because I saw them the most was, for some reason, Comedy Central played High Anxiety the most, so I really liked that. Played History of the World Part 1. I loved it because I was growing up in Catholic school, so finally somebody gets... honestly, it felt great that somebody's making fun of Catholicism here. And this is a Jewish guy. He's doing a better job than I've ever seen. And then obviously Men in Tights, because I think actually I knew friends who actually had that on VHS, and we watched that so many times.
The thing that I remember most about this growing up, and I know it comes across in previous episodes here, we've already talked about it, but I grew up first and foremost having the television version memorized, where they had all of the foul language in terms of curse words bleeped out. They had the farts bleeped out, but they kept every single racial epithet. And I just would watch the TV copy that I had recorded on the VCR over and over and over. And so when I finally saw the theatrical version, I was like, well, wait a minute. Where's the scene where Mongo goes diving? Where's the scene where Mongo puts the quarter in the machine? Where's the scene where the governor comes into town and starts wanting to get a photo op with all the fake members of Rockridge? And it bothered me that the theatrical version is lacking those scenes.
So wait, you're saying, I didn't know this part. So you're telling me that the TV version had more scenes at times than the theatrical cut?
Yes.
So were these deleted scenes that they found later and then put them in?
No, I don't think they found them and put them in. It may have been specifically where they wanted to add more time because it's only a 93-minute movie as is with the theatrical release. Okay. So to fill a 2-hour block on, ABC Sunday night movie of the week or whatever, they were going to have to, I think it was actually CBS is who debuted this first. CBS had it, and they had to have extra footage to put in there because it just wasn't enough to show the movie. Oh. And Mel Brooks actually, and we found out when we interviewed Burton Gilliam, Alex Karras was a little upset with the role of Mongo, not just because he was sort of a dumb character in his mind, but so much of his scenes got chopped out of the theatrical release. We actually get to see Sheriff Bart defeat Mongo 3 separate unique times in Rockridge before we see him chained up in the jail. And so when we get to those minutes, for those listeners listening to now, minute 39, we will make sure we call out those minutes and tell you where you can find them on YouTube, because there are those full outtakes available for you to watch.
So there's no extended cut of this where it like does both. You get all the raunchy language and the extra scenes. There's no.
I wish.
Yeah, I haven't seen that anywhere.
I wish there was an option, or somebody would get Mel Brooks to authorize that, where you could, play A for the theatrical, B for the television, C for the hybrid, or something.
Okay, because this is honestly the first thing that came to my mind when you told me that the TV cut had more scenes in the theatrical was Goonies. I remember Goonies on TV. They had 2 scenes they added to it to extra pad it. One was like early in the movie, the Goonies, they go to a convenience store and they eat snacks and they get bullied by the town bully. And it's kind of a non-scene. It's just them saying, yeah, we're going to go find pirate treasure.
Yeah.
Well, the second scene later in the movie is the actual octopus attack. They say in the movie, the octopus was scary. And you're going, and when you watch the theatrical cut, you're like, why would you lie about an octopus? You had an actual adventure and you defied Fratelli's death, defying the swords and guns and everything, and a pirate ship. Why would you lie about an octopus? And then you realize they actually filmed an octopus, and it's horrible. Like, it's like clearly the puppet did not work that day. They had to film it like in reverse to try and make it look like they actually, they had it coming in or out of the water grabbing them, and then when everyone started screaming and kicking it, it just went away and it's never addressed again. It's a horrible puppet scene. So it's it's one of those things where I never, you never knew that. I had the VHS copy because I from Blockbuster. Like my parents just bought it for me because I complained so much I wanted to watch it. And then like I saw on TNT one day, I'm like, oh, here I am on the TV on the couch, I'm gonna watch it. And they add those scenes. I went, oh, I remember this. And then I was, oh,
that's wild. I've always wondered about that line because I never have seen Goonies the television version. I've always just seen the theatrical or the DVD. So you're right, though. I've never understood
Google
that line.
That, yeah.
Look at that. I am this many years old when I suddenly have it explained to me.
Well, like I said, like, it's just a weird line where you go, why talk about an octopus when everyone's like, dude, why try to raise the stakes? You found a pirate ship, real gold, and you stopped the Fratellis all in like one day. Why go, let's raise the stakes a bit. There was an octopus too. But yeah, it's on YouTube. You can find the scene. But yeah, so that's actually amazing that we're talking technically there's 2 cuts of this film that's so almost different vibes.
Well, it's the same overall vibe, I think, in the sense that it's still the Sheriff Bart being the clever trickster, always managing to one-up whoever he goes up against. I actually just like the idea of beating Mongo 3 times.
Yeah.
And then if you go check it out, the additional scene of when the governor shows up and he starts complaining about his driver because he's a member of a union, and he's like, damn unions are ruining the West, and all these newspaper guys start writing. He goes, don't quote that! Never put that in the paper! It's a great commentary on your typical lifelong politician who doesn't know anything they're doing except how to be in office. So, it's worth YouTubing those scenes. And we're gonna, again, as we get to those minutes, for those listeners who are like, wait a minute, I thought I was tuning into minute 39. we will get to those when we get to those scenes. So let's go ahead and set the table for today, because we are doing minute 39, and we are going to continue with the story happening in the jail, in the office of the sheriff's office, where Jim and Bart are talking. And at the last minute, remember yesterday, Bart, realizing now that the sad kind of story that Jim was telling, decides to hand him and goes, here, have a drink. So we're going to start with Jim taking the bottle and saying thanks, and we're going to end with Sheriff Bart saying, when suddenly from out of the... But we're not going to get the rest of it. We're going to have to find out what's going on here. So let's go ahead and open this up right off the bat. Walt, you had an engagement yesterday. You weren't able to kind of sit in with us when Jim told his sad tale of, hearing draw in his sleep. So I want to give you a couple of minutes to just kind of give us your thoughts of how yesterday bridges in today, since you weren't able to record with us.
Well, I haven't listened to yesterday's episode yet, so I have no idea what genius things you talked about. But
lacking you, it was brilliant.
And I understand it was about 30 minutes shorter. So
it was a little shorter, yeah.
So, well, and it's too bad because I really had some brilliant stuff in my notes to bring us in. In fact, I had like a 45-minute explanation of everything to do with that scene. But I mentioned yesterday in one of the earlier episodes, I really like how much time they're taking to build that relationship between the two of these guys. and allowing that, the time I think it really needed to grow without anything crazy. There's no real over the top Mel Brooks, kind of stuff. There's no eye poking or anvils falling on people. And no cows walking through. It's just two guys getting to know each other, and two guys coming from a very different background. And I really like the bonding relationship that's going on there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna jump on this now for this minute then with our guests here, Sean and Dave, because one of the questions we asked ourselves, would we have wanted to see Jim's story told in flashback or montages? And I said I didn't think that would work. I liked the idea of him just telling his story and being the storyteller, and we just watch the performance of Gene Wilder. Because if we had seen him, shoot guy after guy after guy, and then here comes a little kid, and the little kid's, he spins on him and he walks away and the kid shoots him, I almost think it would have been too real, and I don't know, it becomes too concrete, and I'd rather it be just a story. And as we move into this minute, had we had all of that, I think it's going to diminish what we would have had today, which we do get to see what Sheriff Bart is telling about with his story.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I until this moment, I never thought about that. And it's obvious now that you mention it. It's one of those things. As soon as somebody says something, you can't miss it. That right, we're going to get some flashbacks of, from Sheriff Bart, but Jim's story told straight up. And I'm having trouble imagining that. I can imagine the scenes in my head, what they look like. I've seen, scenes from Westerns and the gunslinger shooting guys down, but I don't see that as adding to the movie. I do think they made the right choice and kind of just giving it to us from Jim's word, and allow Jim to paint the mental picture for us. And then I think on the flip side, I think they do a good job of giving us the flashbacks with the voiceover of Sheriff Bart to kind of, show us that. And that's, there's going to be some humor. There's going to be some good comedy coming out of that. And there are things that what they've done with those flashbacks that I don't think would translate if the sheriff was telling us these things rather than us seeing them in flashback. I don't think they work as well. So I think I agree with the choice in terms of how they've set up these flashbacks.
I also think we have to remember this really is Sheriff Bart's story, and it's great that we love Gene Wilder, but this really is Sheriff Bart's story, and I like that we actually get to see his recollection and his memory play out on the screen.
Well, and there's something else too that's kind of interesting about the flashback for the Waco Kid. It's just a flashback that we've seen 5 billion times in Western movies. For Sheriff Bart, they take a real stab at the whole Western movie industry and how inaccurate they are, because you have the Jewish Indian and which we don't get to in this minute, but we're going to get to in part of this whole overall flashback. Yeah. Well, and I've only heard about it. I haven't watched that far ahead yet. But so we get a good taste of another shot kind of at the industry. So it's valuable in many ways.
It's not just a shot at the industry, which they're always sort of poking fun at Western tropes. You got to remember they were also calling to light some of the post-civil rights era issues that we were still dealing with in our country, and the fact that we get a glimpse of this long, glorious wagon train, sort of this the Blazing Saddles theme comes in, but it's done symphonically as if it's some part of a John Ford Western, and then just as we're seeing this magnificent line of wagons, he makes the comment go, well, we weren't exactly part of it. We were sort of bringing up the rear.
You might say we was bringing up the rear, when suddenly, from out of the west, came the entire Sioux Nation. And let me tell you, baby, they was open for business.
And it once again reminds us there are still issues in 1974 where people are being told, because of where they were born or what they look like or where they came from, you don't get to be in the front of the line, or you don't get to be part of our group. And I love that we get that little bit right here, but done through comedy.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up something that I wrote my note here about. Their way of drinking the bottle kind of, there's two different like levels of care. Whereas Waco Kid, he's just swigging from the bottle in a devil may care fashion. But Bart has a nice brandy glass that he's drinking out of. He kind of holds it with a respect, if you will.
A sophistication
Where, yeah, and obviously his shirt and everything is clean. He doesn't, where Waco Kid, like, he's definitely been thrown out of taverns. We've seen, just one look at him, you could believe that. And it's just like, I don't know, I just kind of like, immediately you see the two differences in how these two men carry themselves.
Well, and we talked about that a little bit earlier this week with our previous guests, the fact that Sheriff Bart always is beating whatever sort of preconceived notions we would think about him. That here's this guy that came from a railroad industry where he was probably, put there maybe against his will or couldn't find any other work, and yet he outsmarts everybody. He's quicker than everybody. He can verbally beat people. He beats the Waco Kid at chess, and he's got that air of sophistication. You just can't help but like Sheriff Bart in every scene that Mel Brooks has painted for us.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think he is a fantastic character, and you couldn't, as much as I like Richard Pryor, I love the way that Cleavon Little plays him. And even this scene would be so different with Richard Pryor.
Oh, is he one of the original casting options?
Yes.
He was the option, according to Mel Brooks. In fact, the story was that Mel Brooks was ready to quit the project if they didn't agree to hire Pryor. And it was Richard Pryor who talked Mel Brooks down and said, look, I still am a writer on the script. I still have a couple of paychecks coming my way. If you quit, they're not going to pay me. So let me help you. I'll help you with the casting. And actually, it was Richard Pryor who said, there's your man, Cleavon Little. When he came into the audition, Richard Pryor said right off the bat, that is Sheriff Bart.
Good. I'm glad he talked him into it. Wasn't any ego of no, I can do it better. Like he knew this guy's gonna play him.
Yeah. You know what? And Walt, I think you and I, because we're in every episode, this is our show, I think we have to remind ourselves sometimes of some of the messages that people may not know, because I actually ran into somebody today who had no idea Richard Pryor was one of the script writers and actually was the person who was responsible for giving the yay or nay to every single use of the N-word in the script, that Mel Brooks specifically deferred to him and said, is it okay here or should we remove it? And a lot of times he would say, Richard Pryor would say, not only do you need it here, you need to also add it here and here.
It definitely highlights the care that they were taking to make sure that they got their point across without being offensive. And I have to...
Or to use offense when needed to make the message.
True. And you really have to appreciate what Mel Brooks' attitude was when he was putting this together.
Yeah. I mean, it's to have the diversity of the writing staff, the diversity of the West reflected here, which, by the way, was much more accurate than any other Western up to this time, and to have Sheriff Bart, who, by the way, there were other black sheriffs out there. One of the more famous is Bass Reeves, who a lot of the stories say that this marshal, a black marshal in the Old West, was responsible for as many, if not more, arrests than all of the other marshals that we know about, like, what's his name from Tombstone, the Earp brothers, we've got these rich cultural stories that Hollywood has forever ignored.
Yeah,
Wow.
and that makes sense. It shouldn't be a surprise because you guys well covered during your previous season on Young Frankenstein the care that they took, that Mel Brooks took in constructing that and being faithful to the original material that he was satirizing, as far as, going as far as using the original laboratory for Dr. Frankenstein and things like that attention to detail. So it shouldn't be a surprise that, in this kind of satire, this, a different kind of movie moving to a different genre, Western versus the monster sci-fi movie. But, we really shouldn't be surprised that, that level of care and attention to detail that he brings to the movie.
Walt, that's one of the things I think I love about doing this whole movies by minutes format, is it forces you to look at the construction of even individual lines and to hear about just the knowledge these guys had in the writing room when they were battling over how to phrase and put things together. Some of the references, some of the allusions, and then then you've got what's on the screen. You've got the visual gags. You've got the historical gags. You've got the contemporary, anachronistic gags. It's just amazing. And yet a lot of times people will just dismiss this as a silly goofball comedy, and they couldn't be further from that. They couldn't be further from the truth.
That's true. Like, I mean, I'm watching Blazing Saddles as a kid. I'm watching it in the 90s on TV, and so it's a little cleaned up. So, I'm missing the fact that, like, when this movie came out in its time, Westerns were either, it was either a John Wayne piece or it was like the blaxploitation type. Like, that's like the two you had. And then this one comes along. It's like, we're going to tell it more serious.
Right. It's ironic that the comedy satire actually has the more correct backdrop and diversity makeup than Hollywood had done before. and Hollywood has updated. I mean, as you know, a lot of the more contemporary Westerns that have come out in the late 90s and into the 2000s show a much more diverse West. But actually, one of our guests that we had early on this season is a black cowboy reenactor, and he grew up thinking that, because even his parents said, well, it's nice you want to be a cowboy, but there were no black cowboys, because his parents didn't even know. And when he finally started going to the library and started talking to other people, he was like, not only were there black cowboys, about 25% of the West was made up of freed slaves and blacks who had gone out to forge their own destiny. And he said, and I was missing that my whole childhood.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing what we can learn? It's a Mel Brooks comedy.
It's edutainment. We're learning as we're laughing.
It's edutainment. All right. Well, as we go through here, I do want to touch on this wagon train for a minute, because I looked to see where, if anything, if this footage came from another movie, and I could not find it anywhere. And I'm wondering if maybe Mel Brooks actually had these wagons here with this scene, but later in the script, which we'll get to tomorrow, the scene of the Indians attacking is actually listed in the script as insert stock footage here.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that takes care of my note for tomorrow.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, all right. Yeah. I was like, I wonder if, you filmed so much here, but, filming the stock footage. And actually, all right. So I thought it's interesting that he starts his tale so far back. If someone asks you, what is the phrasing that Waco actually asks? Because you would think, like, you would talk about how I got to the town, or how I got to become a sheriff, or how I got into law enforcement. He starts his story far back when I was a toddler, and how we went from the far west, or how we traveled into the West, how we decided it wasn't good enough in the city or wherever the East Coast we were in. We decided, well, we're getting, racially, because of our race, we're getting screwed here. Let's take our chances in a wagon train out west. Maybe it'll be better then.
What I like here is he does say back in 56, which means this is pre-Civil War when his family managed to make their way west. So it does let us know, at least if we're going to go with a historical timeline, he was not part of the freed slave movement that many of them did go work on the railroads. He moved out there with his family when he was a lot younger, and they were either free from the North or had escaped from the South, but it was pre-Civil War.
Yeah, so this is pre-Civil War, towards the end of the gold rush, which, most of there's kind of the quick research I did online kind of figures the 55 to be the end of the gold rush. So they're kind of, the California gold rush. So they're towards the end of that time. But in terms of, how does Jim pose the question that gets this kind of response? Well, what he says is,
what's a dazzling urbanite like you doing in a rustic setting like this?
And that's such a perfect line. That's so well stated. What he's saying is, can be summed up, could be said much more succinctly in much more plain words. But the way Jim dresses it up, the way that the dialogue is dressed up in the script, makes it a very lyrical line. That dazzling urbanite like you doing in a rustic setting. And I also I like the line Bart says, well,
If you really must pry,
Oh, I must.
And that's a callback to the line that Jim has, the talk between Hetty and the governor, where he's like, Hetty's trying to build up the governor, like what this could mean. You're on the forefront. You're, setting up one of the first black sheriffs, or the first black sheriff in the West. You'll be, your name will go down in history, and it could set up, dare I say, and then and Jim says, dare. And before Hetty says, well, this could lead to nomination to the president. So I like that little callback that Jim is saying, repeating something in a manner that.
You mean Bart?
Well,
you mean Bart?
Oh yeah,
saying
Bart
that.
saying that. But I like that little callback, that repetition.
You know what's funny, and I'm glad you're bringing that up, because Walt and I have been keeping track of this, what I'm calling the echo effect throughout this entire script. If you go back now and rewatch this movie, it's not just Bart, although it happens a lot, but there are so many characters that actually either parrot each other or say the same line twice for whatever reason in the scene. Because you've got when Taggart first shows up and goes, and it's right here in Rock Ridge. And then Lamar goes, Rock Ridge. He goes, yes, Rock Ridge. He goes, be still, Taggart. There's this constant repetition. And Walt theorized that maybe in places people were still laughing and they needed to make sure that you didn't miss something in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But there's also this echo effect, like you said, about because the previous story, he goes, well, if you must pry, it's like, I must. And then Jim flips it right back around him on this one. He goes, I must. So I love it. It's throughout this whole script so far. I don't think we've gone more than a couple of episodes where there isn't an echo of a line identically restated in one of the minutes. It's kind of cool.
And I don't remember that being a Mel Brooks trope either. He doesn't do that in any of the other movies that I can think of.
Yeah, well, put it this way, it didn't come to me in terms of watching even the Blazing Saddles the first time until we started breaking it down. I'm like, look at that. They're saying these same phrases over and over in the scene, almost like just in case we missed it the first time.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of the other Mel Brooks movies. I think it's just this one where it's, that rhetorical trick is repeated so often.
And if you think about it, and go back to the date though, he says he's been here since he was a toddler. He's been out west. So this isn't, being in the West isn't new to him. He's grown out here. Like he wasn't like, a couple weeks ago I was over in, I was in New York and I just took a train out here. No, it's like he's been born out. I don't know if has the Waco kid been out west as this long since, he was like 3.
We never get the whole backstory of Jim, but you get the sense that he's certainly been out there for a while. And if this kid that we're going to get introduced to in later minutes here coming up with you guys, if we're guessing that he's maybe 8 or 9 years old, and we know our current timeline is 74, that puts Bart between 28 and 30 years old.
Well, I also think it's important that for some of those deeper themes that we were talking about that this movie has, that certainly the townfolk of Rock Ridge see the sheriff as an outsider who's coming in. And I think it's important for us to know he's new to this town, but like I said, he's not new to the West. He's one of these people since not only has he been here a long time, he's been there since he was young. The 20 years between 5 and 25 are much different than, say, the 20 years between 30 and 50. So, yeah.
He'd be more of an outsider if he went to New Orleans,
Right.
Because he'd be like, I'm not used to this city living. I'm used to out west.
Yeah.
You know what? But isn't that part of yet another cool textual layer to the film where we have an expectation of a person because of what they might look like, or we just kind of assume a background when in reality, all he's known is being raised in the West. Like he belongs out here.
Right.
I love it.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, even, as far as we know, when Jim's asking, what's a dazzling urbanite like you doing in a rustic setting like this, when it's, well, he's not an urbanite. Probably the scene where he's about to be hung and he gets saved by Hetty and the governor. That may be the closest he's come to a big city, the most urban his experience goes. Kind of talking about the divergence of expectations and reality. And I mean, one of the things I think of is what he's saying when he says urbanite. he's saying he's dark skinned. I mean, and that's sort of a trigger word or a synonym that's used to this day. In current talk to say urbanite as a code word for minorities or African American. And he's as we see, he's not urbanite. He is of the West, and there were no big cities in the West at this time, really.
Right. I think it does play a great double entendre because urbanite, as on the surface, does mean somebody who lives in a city.
Yeah. But
I think you're right. There's also that subtext with you live in the urban part of the city, so you're probably in a minority, in a mostly minority setting within the big city. And so I think it would have conveyed to the audience, and I think it still does to this day, sort of a double meaning. There's a double meaning in that.
Yeah, a double meaning.
All right. Well, as we, and I don't want to cut this short, but I do want to get to one thing here that in the script here, it does call for, as we move in the story, we see a long line of what he calls Conestoga wagons heading west. And I was like, okay, I'm going to look up what a Conestoga wagon is. That actually is a misnomer in the script. What we're seeing are actually true covered wagons, which would be your typical ox wagon or hay wagon, where you would get these curved steel bars, put them, lash them to the sides, and then stretch fabric over them, which is what we see. If you ever get a chance to look up what a Conestoga wagon looks like, it's almost like a giant banana-shaped wagon. It's got a deep curve to it, and the way it's designed is to be a hauling wagon. They could put up to 5,000 pounds of goods and carry it with usually oxen. In fact, one of the things I read, very rarely would you go on a wagon train with horses pulling the wagons, which is a trope we get from Hollywood. But according to what I read, if you were going any long distances, you probably had ox, which you would go slower, but they could handle the constant walking for a lot longer.
Interesting. I'm guessing getting horses was cheaper, or at least this footage of, the equivalent of the stock footage here for this shot.
Oh, I'm sure. By today, and in 1974, I don't know how many ranches were using ox to forge their way west. So,
but it makes sense when if you're moving your family and your livelihood and all your goods across the country, heading out west, you're more interested in endurance than speed. You're not going to be pushed. You're not going to want these horses in a gallop.
Yeah.
You'd want. Yeah, that makes sense.
And let's talk about Oregon Trail. That's all about. That's all. Hey, that's all about. That's all about. I mean, honestly, that game was, in almost every, for me at least, it was on almost every computer back in school. But thinking about it now, I'm after reading about the Donner Party and situation, you really want to pick when you want to leave, and you want to pick, not 400 bullets. I don't need 400 bullets. I need salted beef and preserved food. That's what I actually need.
The Oregon Trail, all of the trails started in Independence, Missouri. The Oregon Trail was 2,000 miles. So can you imagine 2,000 miles in a wagon getting drugged by an ox? I mean, that is some hard travel.
For what was it? I think it's a year, maybe 16 months.
No, I think they could do it in under. That's why you had to be very careful when you left, because you did not want to get caught in the hard snows trying to cross the Rockies.
Right, and that was what the Donner Party did. They left late.
And then they tried to make, I think, if I remember correctly, last podcast on the left did a great job on this one, by the way.
They tried to take the pass to Carathos.
That's it. They tried some stuff. There was some fights. There was some infighting, and certain people went, I heard of a better way, and slowly but surely, it got worse when they got to the mountains.
You were talking about the ride out west, by the way. We get Little House on the Prairie recollections, mom, pa, or, dad's driving, sitting up on top, and you got all the kids in the back. But honestly, there was no suspensions in most of these wagons because they just weren't built for comfort. And one of the things I read that said covered wagons were primarily used for cargo and for really small children, the elderly, or the infirm, because it was such a rough ride, it was nearly unbearable. You'd rather walk alongside the wagon than actually be stuck in it.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah. So these are hardy folk. If you weren't hardy when you left, You damn well were by the time you got to the end of your travels. You were
that, or you're a beef jerky. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, or you didn't last long.
Yeah, I try to tell my children, my kids this from time to time when they tell me how hard life is. I'm like, I want to tell you something. I want to imagine crossing 2,000 miles of unexplored wilderness with nothing but a couple of ox and a covered wagon. You tell me about hard times.
When I was a kid and a member of the Donner Party, well, just hand me a toothpick.
Yeah. Unfortunately, all my kids hear every one of my stories in their heads. They hear me starting off, back in my day. Like, stop it. All right. Well, we are at the very end of the minute here, and we get this little social commentary about the fact that his party, his mom and dad, which we're going to meet next minute, were not allowed to even, I mean, they were not just at the back of the wagon train. I mean, they were at the back of the wagon train. They weren't even allowed to be the last wagon. They had to be, looks like a good 200-300 yards behind the last wagon.
Yeah, following at a distance may be generous.
And I want to, because we've been going through the script, I will tell you, with just some minor tweaks, all of this has been flowing pretty much exactly as they say, that we haven't had any changes, adds, or removes. So it's been really, really good.
Nice.
We're going to have some changes tomorrow, but today the script is intact.
Okay, good. Well, I'll look forward to hearing what crazy crap got dropped.
Oh, you're going to like it. All right. Well, as we start to wrap up this minute 39, Sean, I'll go to you first. Was there anything in your minutes that we didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up?
No. I think we covered all my notes. Though I just want to go back a little, just expand a little bit more on a point you made about the pacing, about how Bart and Jim meet. It's about minute 33, and then the last 10 minutes or so, and we're still going through just them getting to know each other and kind of filling in each other on their backstories. That the pacing of this movie is really good. I mean, it just moves really smoothly. I don't feel like there's any downtime. I'm never like checking my watch to see like, oh God, is this thing over yet? But kind of studying up and rewatching in preparation for the podcast, noticing some of the beats that it's around minute 18, 19 before the townsfolk even have that meeting where they send the request for a new sheriff. That's about almost 20 minutes into the film. Then it's about 33 minutes when, Bart and Jim meet. And then now it's still kind of introductory where they're getting to know each other, and almost halfway through the movie. It's only a 90-minute movie, and we're coming up on minute 40. And then, when the way things pick up, it just moves along really well. I don't feel it's rushed. It's not too fast. It's not too slow. It's just right. I feel like we're right where we should be when we should be here.
I think we've said similar things, but I do love the construction of the pacing of this, because we got so much information, but it's not too hard to digest. But at the same time, it never slows down, that we're just saying, come on, pick it up. It's actually probably one of the best paced Mel Brooks movies of all of his films.
Agreed. Anything
Anything else in your minutes or in your notes?
Nope, that's all I had for minute 39.
All right, Dave, what about you?
I'm good. I'm good. I love Sean. He's got all these notes. I'm like, no, I'm good. I enjoyed this minute. We had a good talk. I'm excited to go to minute 40.
Excellent. All right, Walt, what about you?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. Well, as we start to then wrap this up, before I tell you what's coming up in Friday, you're going to want to stick around for the next episode. Sean and Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about where people can learn a little bit more about some of the work you guys have done as podcasters?
Go ahead, Dave. I yield the floor to you.
All right. Well, yes. Of course, Sean and I, we worked on Groundhog Minute. So, you can go to Groundhog Minute. We obviously talk about all the Bill Murray film. And I work on 5 Minutes of Mystery, which covers the 1999 superhero comedy ensemble hit Mystery Men in 5-minute intervals.
Yeah, and before I did Groundhog Minute with Dave, I did Spinal Tap Minute with my great co-host Heidi Bennett, where we covered the movie This is Spinal Tap, 1 minute at a time. And where I'm sending folks is my own personal well, not my own landing page, but the website for my wife and myself. It's catandshawn.org, and it's a CAT, cat short for Catherine, catandshawn.org. And that links to the Groundhog Minute for Groundhog Day, links to the Spinal Tap Minute, also links to something I do called 5 Minutes of Mime, where I talk about the silent performing art of mime in 5-minute episodes. And then I linked all my guest appearances. So if you missed or you've blocked from your memory my appearances during the Young Frankenstein era of this program, I've got links to those episodes and my other guest appearances. So that's all at catandshawn.org.
Fantastic. And folks, I would tell you, if you are a fan of Young Frankenstein, you only just stumbled across our podcast here in season 2, you need to go back and specifically pull up those minutes with Sean. We had such a good time. It was both a lot of detail learning, but in a very fun way.
It was definitely one of those things. Yeah.
I'm serious.
Maybe.
You know what? I am totally serious. Walt, where can people learn a little bit more about our show and maybe about season 1?
Well, pay attention close because I'm going to mime it for you. Ready? Okay, well, that didn't work very well.
Brilliant.
So the best place to go to find a lot about us is facebook.com/The Wilder Ride, and join our listeners group. And the listeners group is great. We've got a ton of people posting all kinds of crazy stuff, and some of it's about this movie, some of it's about other stuff. So, it's all kind of entertainment based and everything, no other crazy stuff. So join us there and keep on listening.
Excellent. We'll come back tomorrow, Friday, as we wrap up the week. We're going to continue with what's going on here with the flashback of Bart's memory crossing the West. We're going to start off with the line, the West, which remember, the very last thing we had is when suddenly from out of the West came the entire Sioux nation, and we're going to end with an Indian chief speaking Yiddish. But to figure out what all that's all about, you got to come back tomorrow for this, The Wilder Ride.
Well, hey, Alan, I've been meaning to ask you, what's a dazzling urbanite like you doing on a podcast like this?
I've been asking myself, it's right after I asked myself, why did I ask you to join me?
Yeah, well, I can understand that.
Oh, dear Lord. It's always fun, though. Anyway.
It's something.
It is something. I need Cut.
I was like, wait, are they done? I don't know if they're done.